Indeed, an urgent report published today in the Wall Street Journal, which cites its own sources in the White House, explains the sharp change in Donald Trump's position, who suddenly started talking about a possible victory for Ukraine and that Ukraine should regain all the territory seized by the Russians. The publication writes that United States President Donald Trump received information about a new counteroffensive by the armed forces of Ukraine, which is planned for the near future and will require American support, which Donald Trump promised to provide to Zelensky. This explains the fact that Trump repeated several times that he wants to give Ukraine time to try to regain its lands before taking any other actions. And this also explains his public admiration for the armed forces of Ukraine. Nevertheless, in this episode, let's analyze what is known about the upcoming counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine and what the chances of a breakthrough are. And most importantly, what role Donald Trump is ready to play in this likely offensive. My name is Alexei Pechi, and before we start this episode, I want to remind you that every day on this YouTube channel, several news analysis segments about events around the world are released. So that you stay up to date with absolutely all the news, I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel and liking this episode. So, I'll start this episode by reminding you that just 6 months ago, in the Oval Office, President Trump told Volodymyr Zelensky that he had no trump cards in the war with Russia. And that's why it's time to agree to any terms just to stop the war. But on Tuesday, September 23, at the United Nations, Donald Trump praised the actions of the Ukrainian army and mocked Russia's military efforts. And most importantly, he stated that Ukraine can still win this war. Then he said, and I quote, "Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is able to fight and win throughout the entire territory of Ukraine, restoring it to its original state." Why not? Later, during a meeting with Emmanuel Macron, Trump repeated this idea publicly. He added that he truly believes in a breakthrough by the armed forces of Ukraine, and stated that only after that can it be decided what to do next. At the same time, officials from the United States of America stated that Trump did this urgently. This statement is partly intended to put pressure on the Russian president Vladimir Putin and force him to make a deal, since no real progress has been made in ending the war since the meeting between Trump and Putin in August in Alaska. It is also worth noting here that Trump's sharp change in tone occurred against the backdrop of Russia's continued failures in its attempts to achieve significant success on the battlefield. The slowdown of the Russian economy and the targeted efforts of Zelensky to win over the United States president. Trump spent the last few days with United States officials who have long advocated for a tougher stance toward Russia, preparing for his meeting with Zelensky, including the Special Representative for Ukraine, Kit Kellogg, and the new ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz. And let me remind you, both support Ukraine, and here is what the Wall Street Journal writes about this. According to Dubaikov, 2 people are familiar with the situation. They informed Donald Trump about the current situation on the battlefield, noting that Russia has not made significant progress in recent years. According to the sources, Trump was also informed about the planned Ukrainian offensive on the front, which will require support from United States intelligence. Officials said that Trump has only changed his rhetoric, but not his policy. He still allows the sale of weapons to Ukraine, but restricts the use of American weapons for attacks on the sovereign territory of Russia. Well, after this insider information, it becomes clear why. Trump wrote the following, quote, "After getting to know and fully understanding the military and economic situation in Ukraine and Russia, and after I saw the economic problems this is causing in Russia, I think that Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win, returning all of Ukraine to its original state." Well, that is, Trump is actually not being dishonest at this point. He really was only recently made aware of the real situation, which was brought to him by Kit Kellogg and Michael Waltz. Volodymyr Zelensky already confirmed it. On the other hand, on Tuesday, Zelensky demonstrated that he had learned lessons from the failed meeting with Trump at the end of February. He dressed up after criticism from Trump's supporters, and while sitting next to the President of the United States. Before the meeting on Tuesday, Zelensky repeatedly thanked him for his support, praised his efforts to end the war, and highly appreciated the actions of the Ukrainian army on the battlefield. Trump later stated that Zelensky clearly understands the situation and is well informed about all aspects of this war. Well, it's far from certain that Trump's change in tone will be reflected in a change of policy. And for now, he is not ready to impose serious sanctions against Russia, despite threats to do so, or to provide Ukraine with the amount of weaponry needed to regain, if not all, the significant territories and to protect its cities from Russian air bombardments. Nevertheless, in one thing, Trump has already kept his word. On Tuesday, Trump promised Zelensky to call Viktor Orban to persuade him to make Hungary refuse to buy Russian gas and oil. And already on September 24, Wednesday, Trump really did have a conversation with Orban. And it was clearly a heated conversation because Hungary decided not to disclose the details of the talk. That means there wasn't much to brag about. Even the Kremlin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov admitted on Wednesday that Zelensky's position currently dominates in relations with Trump. But Russia, they say, will have the opportunity to convey its position to the White House. But here the Russians faced failure. United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio already met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Wednesday morning, and in the end, there was only a short message on the United States State Department website. Rubio met with Lavrov. They talked about Russia's war against Ukraine, that's all. Zelensky really took advantage of the moment and, speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, called on representatives of member countries to condemn Russia, which continues to prolong this war. He also warned that if it is not stopped, Moscow will seek to expand its ambitions in Europe. Next is a quote. Ukraine is just the first example. Russian drones are already flying all over Europe, and Russian operations are already spreading to other countries. Well, skeptics say that Trump's words mean nothing, or that they mean he's stepping away from business. Nevertheless, the obvious reassessment by the United States President of Ukraine's chances in this war is also accompanied by a commitment to continue supplying weapons to European NATO members, who then transfer them to Ukraine for use against Russia. And now Zelensky's rehabilitation looks even more surprising, considering the criticism he received in the Oval Office at the end of February. That meeting was supposed to clarify the situation, after Zelensky said he was concerned that the United States president was adopting Kremlin talking points. Trump responded by calling Zelensky a dictator without elections. Well, by September 23, Trump had even adopted some of Zelensky's talking points. He mocked the Russian army for its slow advance against a much smaller country, and he also praised the Ukrainian troops. Here's a quote from Trump. "We have great respect for the fight that Ukraine is putting up. It's truly amazing." And in the end, even United States Vice President J.D. Vance said that Trump is becoming incredibly impatient with the Russians. Next is a quote from Vance. Trump is responding to reality on the ground. He is becoming incredibly impatient with the Russians. The United States president sees the numbers and is convinced that the war is hurting Russia. Trump hasn't changed his stance on the war in Ukraine, but he has warned the Russians about the consequences if they defend. Refusals of peaceful settlement. If the Russians refuse to hold peace talks on Ukraine, it will be very bad for their country. Trump probably did receive information about the upcoming Ukrainian armed forces offensive, and, importantly, about Europe's readiness to support Ukraine. Therefore, his task now is simple, to not interfere and to continue supplying NATO weapons. Well, Trump will get the credit too. He definitely has nothing to worry about here. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.